Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the Vagina Doctor podcast. This is our first anniversary. We're very excited about that. It's been a very, very interesting year. And as you may remember, I was a little reluctant to get into this in the first place. You pulled me in kicking and screaming, but you were right. It's been really fun. It's been very, very educating for me. And I think it's been good for our patients and our friends and anybody who's been interested in listening.
Yeah, I think it's been great too. I handle the phone calls in the afternoon in the office sometimes. And I've just recently, a lot of people comment on, oh, I went onto your website and I went down the rabbit hole of your podcast and I already know I want to schedule and this is what I want to schedule for. So I think, just for marketing purposes, it's been a really great modality to use. I think probably one of the most successful things we've done, but also I think people really connect with you as an authority. And they did before as well, but I see a shift and that they're really getting to know you before they walk in the door, which is kind of nice.
I agree. There's a little more familiarity.
But just before we get into the clips, I wanted to ask you just a couple questions about for you. I mean, I know I had to drag you in kicking and screaming. Not really, though. You were just a little hesitant. But how did you shift this year in your thinking about doing the podcast to doing it, to then getting in the routine of doing it, all the great guests? I mean, what did you think? Did you really grow this year with this project before you?
Absolutely. No question. I learned that, and this may seem really kind of obvious, I should have known it already, is just being well prepared, knowing who the guest was going to be, why they wanted to come on, why I wanted or we wanted that person or a modality to come in. It's been really educating for me. I've learned a lot, and I could say that it's made the practice better. And the point that you just made about patients being more familiar with what we do is there's already been communication going on before the patient walks through the door. So everybody's better off that way. I've been really encouraged by some of the guests that we've had that have been doing what I do, being vagina doctors.
Exactly.
And just knowing that there are other people out there trying to push the envelope, trying to improve care for women particularly, who have just been focused on that. And I knew these people beforehand, these other docs, but just talking in more detail over sort of an hour face-to-face has been very, very informative. And the other topic that has been really eye-opening to me is the longevity studies that particularly have been done at UCSB and here in Santa Barbara. And I mean, it's just so incredible.
Yeah, there's so many amazing things happening with longevity medicine in Santa Barbara right now. So it's really exciting.
There have been some things that I wouldn't have reached out to in terms of being very excited to have somebody come on and talk about those particular specific subjects. But I've really just let you direct the choices to a large extent, and it's opened my eyes. So thank you.
You're welcome. Well, it's been really fun.
Really, yeah.
I mean, for me, it's all about collaborating with people in our community and outside of our community. And that's just been really fun.
Yeah.
So I've loved it. So thanks for doing the podcast.
You're welcome.
And also, it's been great working with Nick, our producer.
And Nick has chosen these clips for us to talk about today. So I can't wait to see which ones he's chosen. Very much a learning experience. What did I learn in Tofino? I learned how much I didn't know. And There's an interesting book called the Merck Manual of Medicine, which has basically all of medicine in one book, which is a great book. And we had that with us all the time. We had textbooks with us. We learned from each other, and just dealt with everything that came across the door. We were the emergency room physician. We were the pediatrician. We were the obstetrician. So I'm really glad that we've got a clip from our very first podcast, because Tofino, the place that was referred to in that, is a place where I did general practice for about 5 years. And we were cut off from all other medicine, physicians and so on. We were 100 miles away from anybody else. And sometimes it was impossible to even get patients in and out, if we needed more care. And as I said in that clip, I'd learned so much there. It was one of the greatest experiences of my life. And even going back to Tofino now, which we've done a few times, it just grabs me when I go there. It's just a phenomenal place. Tofino on the west coast of Vancouver Island, just beautiful.
So for me, that episode and that clip was the part of that podcast that our patients brought up the most, that they really enjoyed hearing your background, and that way of practicing medicine, with a book in your hand and
Yeah. The textbook open. Yeah.
doing all those, being responsible for all that type of medicine in such a small, remote location.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed doing that episode. Even though I knew all that about you, it was great hearing you talk about it.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a fun time. Facts about this is that the length of time between onset of symptoms and diagnosis of endometriosis is something like 15 to 20 years.
That's crazy.
And it's only shorter in the patients who have infertility because of endometriosis.
Right. Yeah.
And they are being investigated more because of the infertility, not because of the pain. So physicians need to be more aware that endometriosis is a possibility. It really can only be diagnosed surgically or with biopsy. So a lot of physicians are reluctant to just do a laparoscopy on a patient to make a diagnosis. Yeah, that's a really, really good point. Of endometriosis is one of the areas where I feel as physicians, as gynecologists, we've really failed our patients.
Yeah, this episode was probably the most sent forwarded episode we did.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So this episode helped a lot of people, not necessarily our patients. However, I did send it to a lot of patients coming through, but our patients sent it to people they knew who had kids struggling with endometriosis.
Right.
And I got some emails and text messages, and a couple people went to Dr. Karen Orbuck. And so I thought this was a really important medical messaging podcast.
Yeah.
It was really important.
Yeah. Really get that questioning that patients can or should be prepared to ask their doctors, and the doctors be prepared to reach out, to look a little deeper into these things without, a lot of those patients that have those symptoms, this is just a normal physiological episode, and it's all brushed off and then not taken seriously.
Yeah,
and these people are just suffering from it. Yeah. And we're still not very good at treating it. And the things that have been found in the vagina have included goldfish.
Like the cracker?
No.
Like a gold, no, like not like the chips.
A goldfish with scales.
Like a real fish.
Alive?
Not anymore.
Gross. Why? To what end?
Well, the story was that the patient took the goldfish in the bathtub with her. But I think it was some other indication. Yeah, that little segment on things that are found in the vagina.
Yeah.
That got a lot of attention.
That got a lot of attention on TikTok and Instagram. That was probably one of the most watched TikTok and Instagram videos. Was
Really?
that one, things that are found in the vagina.
Yeah.
So that's a great episode. Melissa Drake is too the guest that day, Dr. Drake. I just loved her, and I loved your guys' dynamic. She's someone we boosted along and practiced in Santa Barbara, and she's doing great. And it was really nice to have her on. I'd like to have her back.
Yeah.
So,
time to do that.
yes.
And so just when I think of like the world like that we live in, the ocean that we swim in, you know, the air that we breathe has been so radically painted by this atmosphere of don't talk, don't feel, don't rock the boat, especially for little girls, you know, becoming women. Like, be a good girl, be a pleasing girl. And when I grew up in the 70s, you know, my mom's generation, your generation, grandparents' generation, like there was no space, and it was a survival response.
I don't think my mom would have even, I think she would have been like, oh no, he did it. I love Gabrielle Taylor. She's just, that was a great episode.
Yeah, really fun.
Super powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think she had so much to say about the reality that women face with past trauma and moving forward in their life and being stuck in their life because of trauma.
It's part of what we're trying to do here too in the practice, Turner Medical Arts, in empowering women, listening to them.
Yeah.
And trying to help them along the way. I mean, you know, as a guy in all of this, I mean, what do I know? But
you're just a vagina doctor.
Exactly. But I just think that listening is so important.
Yeah.
In medicine, and for people to feel like they're being heard and they're taken seriously.
Yeah, and we have a patient who's also a friend who called me from the car after listening to that episode, and she was just bawling her eyes out.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was a really powerful episode. For those of you that haven't listened to Gabriella Taylor, go back and take a listen. Or even if you have listened to it, listen to it again.
Yeah.
It's really good.
First thing is identifying what they're doing that got them to that point. And then the second thing is working with them to create, well, what can we do differently, right? Is it the alcohol consumption? Is that the high processed foods or carbohydrates that are contributing to that? What can we do to overcome that and reverse it, right? Because a lot of these things are reversible. So what can we do to prevent those things? I really would love to work with people's physicians and make sure that they are having continued follow-up. I see myself more as a consultant rather than somebody's primary doctor, right? And so my plan is for them to come back in either 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, depending on what our plan is that we create together to overcome that problem.
That was Heidi Millard from Longevity Santa Barbara, a physician, offering an entry to improved or increased imaging for patients, total body DEXA, looking at muscle mass, fat mass, bones, because there's a lot of information that we can get from a study like that, and also ranging full body MRI.
Yeah.
So Heidi enables that and then goes through with the patients the results and to take the appropriate steps, if any, after that. And
what I like about a lot of these clips we're listening to today is that we really have collaborated with all of these individuals.
Yeah.
With our office.
Right.
Referring, you're bringing up these things in consultation. and it's all really coming together and working really nicely.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. She's a huge benefit to the Santa Barbara community.
And she's part of the Vitality
yeah.
Collective.
Yeah.
That there's another episode when we talked to Jeremy Battle,
Yeah.
who founded that organization. And you should just, our listeners should go and listen to that one as well as Heidi's.
Yeah.
Again, we're looking harder into the cause of issues, or actually looking for evidence of issues before they become symptomatic.
Yes, but what's great about Heidi and Jeremy Bettel is that patients are taking their health in their own hands.
Right.
By working with these individuals. They feel very in control of what's happening, in the know. They feel like they have a lot of resources. And that's what I love about referring people to Heidi and Jeremy.
Absolutely.
It's the numbers are rare. I hear from a lot of younger women that are over it already. And I think it's because it's used as a weapon against us. And so often it's never been presented as an expression of love. It's always been presented as, you got to lose your virginity and be deflowered and all those horrific terms for what happens when you lose your virginity. But it was never explained like, oh, you meet someone and you fall in love and you have this mutual experience. It's like, no, you give yourself to someone and it's a loss of something. And so again, that's a general unbaking of just sex, that it's okay for women to like sex. And I don't personally know that many that do. But there are lots of women that love sex. I have one friend who lives here who's 60 something and very sexual and very much likes sex. And, bully for her. I think that's awesome.
Heidi Clements.
Oh, Heidi is a character. She's a force of nature.
Wait a minute. We have to say this. We got the most new followers from Heidi Clements' time on our podcast.
Yeah.
The most comments. Good and bad, let's face it. And the most shares.
Yeah.
I really liked her a lot. I see possible collaborations with her in the future. And I thought she was a really fun guest.
She's a force of nature.
Yeah.
She's incredible.
Yeah.
So I want you to give me some constructive criticism of my role as the vagina doctor.
I think you're a great vagina doctor, and you've been a great podcast host.
It was really the podcasting that I was really asking about.
Well, I think it was Nick, our producer, that called to our attention the things that we're doing too much of. For you, it was And is just a pause, an out loud pause.
Yeah.
Is what is.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about and pausing is we feel awkward pausing, but really that's the natural way we talk. We pause, we listen, we think before we respond.
Hopefully.
But why does it feel so awkward in a podcast? If you were sitting and having a conversation with someone, it would be perfectly acceptable. You wouldn't even be thinking about it. You would just be pausing, But when you're doing a podcast, you feel like you have to say, I think, to fill that pause.
We're just more aware of not talking there and wondering, when am I going to start talking again?
Or what am I going to say next? I'm going to say, so I can think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, I said, I think I said right too much, like agreeing with people, and yes or yeah too much. But really,
we need to get a little better at these things. Is that
well,
what you're
I don't
saying?
know if we need to get better. I think it's just like if someone's saying something and you are in agreement, you're going to say right, or you.
Yeah.
Well, that's the
Just
weird
like
thing
that.
about a podcast, right? Because you are having a conversation, but you're aware it's being recorded.
Right.
See, you just said right.
Yeah. And yeah.
Anyway, it's funny listening to ourselves back.
Yeah.
And we're going to be our own biggest critics, obviously. I don't think anyone else is counting how many times you said or how many times I said right. At least I hope not. But
as usual,
right.
You're right.
Yes. It's just been great talking to a lot of our listeners for me and their comments and how much they like the podcast. And I just want to thank everybody for supporting us this year, because I've felt a lot of love and encouragement from a lot of people, and it's really appreciated. And I'm super excited about this year. We have a new studio and we're excited about it. We're going to be doing a lot more with other people in our studio, a lot more content for providers in our studio, including our own providers in our office. And I'm super excited about this year.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it as well. But we'd really like suggestions from anybody that's listening about subjects that they want to cover or guests they'd like to see.
Yeah, if you know a great guest for the podcast, please let me know and I will reach out to them.
Thanks.
It's been a good year.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for listening. We're getting really good feedback. We'd really appreciate a review on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you're listening. Thank you. You can always DM the Vagina Doctor Instagram with any questions or topics you'd like to learn more about, or email us. The Vagina Doctor Podcast. It all starts here.